Who am I? Who are you? Who are we? For some, identity is shaped by family, friends, or their surroundings. Others put their identity in work. I'm a lawyer, or sports. I'm a football player, or maybe a hobby. I'm a gamer. Still others put their sole identity in their sexuality. I am gay, or their self-perception. I am trans. Yet, do these substitutes actually describe who we are, or something else? And you might wonder, what's the big deal? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Am I just quibbling over words? No. Words matter.
I couldn't agree with you more on this point. Words do matter. And when you are harming people with your words, it absolutely matters. This is Christopher Yuan, author of the book Out of a Far Country, a book that had a profound impact on my life for the better, despite the content. I've met Christopher Yuan and his mother, but it was friend of the channel Drew, Genetically Modified Skeptic, that alerted me to this content. Drew also did a response to this video, and if you haven't seen it, after this video, go check it out. I will be focusing on a very small portion dealing with asexuality. Drew discusses the deplorable way in which Yuan attempts to deal with asexuality. I will go into further detail about what it's like to be asexual and how one deals with being asexual in a sexual world. Let's have a chat. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, and especially to my patrons and channel members. Let's start with Drew's comments that I'd like to expand on. This is from Drew's video, My Gay Conversion Teacher is at it again.
So gay, lesbian, bi, even straight, really should not be used to describe people, but our feelings and actions. In the past few years, I've had several teenage girls come to me with a major concern, pull me aside and whisper, I think I'm asexual. And I whisper back, why? Because I don't have any sexual desires. And I say, okay, let me tell you what that means. You're a teenage girl. Actually, I know some adult women who married without having any sexual desires, and it can often develop later. Nothing strange. Our culture is so hypersexualized that teenage girls without sexual desires are deemed abnormal. So listen carefully. Don't make the presence or absence of sexual desires, or any desire for that matter, who you are. Let me say again, the presence or absence of sexual desires doesn't make you who you are.
When these teenage girls come to him concerned that they're abnormal for not having sexual desires, doesn't Yuan's reassurance of, don't worry, you will develop sexual desires, so you're not actually abnormal, rely on the premise that not having sexual desires is abnormal and cause for concern? If you really want to reassure these girls that they're not abnormal in not having sexual desires, shouldn't you say, that's okay, regardless of whether you do or don't develop them, it's nothing to be ashamed of? Of course, Yuan can't do that because he is the one who actually thinks asexuality is abnormal and outside of God's allosexual heteronormative plan. Also, the fact that he knows women who got married even though they didn't have sexual desires doesn't really support the idea that asexuality will change with marriage and that the relationship will develop into a heteronormative allosexual relationship. Yuan and his community think gay people should get straight married, and we know that doesn't change them sexually. With such a strong pressure on people to get straight married in his community, people likely get married against their best interest all the time. To clarify, asexual people can totally have healthy marriages. You can have a thriving relationship with someone without sex, or with sex that you don't necessarily feel the same drive for as an allosexual person. As long as you can have honest, open communication about your wants and needs, creating a healthy relationship is possible.
And Drew, of course, is spot on. I thought I would add my 2 cents by giving you my story of how I have lived exactly what Drew is talking about. First, I never heard the term asexual until I was in my 50s. So not only did I not know there was such a thing, I certainly didn't know that I was one. What I did know was that when the other girls were talking about how cute a guy was, I often didn't see it. Or I certainly didn't see it the same way that they did. There was one guy in high school that I thought was really cute. He felt nothing for me, so we never had a relationship. I liked to write poetry then, and I wrote a series of poems for him that I finally had the courage to give him in our senior year. He was touched and flattered, but that was the extent of it. We never dated. It was probably better that way, as I didn't actually feel any kind of sexual attraction to him, and had we dated, I may have come to realize that. I found him cute, but I found him cute in the sense that I would admire a beautiful painting. He had a beautiful face. He also had blonde hair and green eyes, a rare combination that I found striking. In addition, he was on the wrestling team and had well-defined muscles, another quality that I find attractive. But again, though I find these attractive, they do not turn me on sexually. The reason I didn't know this in high school is I had so little experience with sexual feelings, I didn't know how to identify them. The one time that I felt sexually aroused as a teenager was when reading Jaws. And you are probably thinking, Jaws? What on earth is sexual in Jaws? It's at the beginning of the book. I can't remember the character names, but she meets him in the diner and he suggests that she take off her panties and sit on his hand in his truck. That did it for me. I still find erotic literature far more arousing than anything that I see. I can be aroused by words, but not pictures, or, with very few exceptions, people. So why don't I seek out erotic literature? Because I don't have a sexual appetite. I don't care if I have sex or don't have sex. I have no natural desire for it. That doesn't mean I have never had sex, as is evidenced by the fact that I have been pregnant 4 times. It just means that I can take it or leave it. Before I got married, I obviously didn't know I was asexual. Part of that was because I was very young. I was 21 when I got married, and I went to conservative churches that discouraged most sexual contact until after marriage. Kissing was okay. My husband and I did do more than just kiss before marriage, but we never had sex. We were never naked together before we were married. We were both virgins on our wedding night, and to this day, I have never had another sex partner. But even after marriage, the people that I called friends, which were people in the church, rarely talked about sex. We certainly never discussed our sexual preferences or desires. So I didn't even know that I felt differently than most people. I knew that other girls made a big deal about certain guys, but that was about the extent of it. I just always thought that I wasn't as interested as they were. I thought it was more a matter of degree than a complete lack of interest. Because I was interested. I was interested in relationships. I was interested in attention. I was interested in dating. I just wasn't interested in sex. I did work with one woman who talked about her sex life and how much she enjoyed sex with her husband. There was one sex act that she described as particularly gratifying. I found it gross. But I let my husband try it after she said how wonderful it felt, and afterward I still found it gross. I chalk this up to us having different sexual tastes. Another experience I had that should have clued me in was when I did feel sexually attracted to a man in the church that I was attending. The feeling was so odd to me that I didn't even know how to deal with it. His wife was a friend of mine. She attended the Bible study that I led. I took her aside and told her that I wanted her to know that I avoided any contact with her husband, as I found him attractive. She said she understood completely, as she heard that from many women. So that was how I dealt with it. I avoided all contact with that man. So you can see that I had very little experience in dealing with sexual feelings, and I didn't know how to handle them. What did that mean for my marriage? Do I find my husband sexually attractive? No, I don't. But that doesn't mean we don't enjoy a good relationship. We enjoy lots of activities together. We enjoy movies and fine dining. We go for a walk almost every day and twice a day on weekends. Have there been any sexual issues between us? Yes, there have been some serious problems. But we've been able to work through them and continue to enjoy a good relationship. Sex isn't the only basis for a good marriage, nor should it be. Companionship is far more important. My husband is a good companion. With that, I am content. Is it possible that I could find a sex partner that would give me something that I have never experienced sexually? Sure, that's possible. But I would never give up the relationship that I have with my husband to find out. I have a good thing. I wouldn't risk losing that to take a chance on gaining what I never had any desire for. How does my husband feel about this? You need to ask him that. And don't bother asking in the comments. He isn't going to respond. So, why did I marry a man that I didn't feel sexually attracted to? For the same reasons that most people marry the people that they do. I was in love with him. One need not have a sexual relationship to have a loving relationship. This kind of marriage is exactly what the demands of no sex before marriage produce. Since the church demanded that we have a sexless dating life, of course our love wasn't built on a sexual relationship. Also, since I've never felt sexual attraction to anyone at that point, I didn't even know that I didn't find him sexually attractive. I didn't know what that meant. Now I do. But if I waited for a mate that I was sexually attracted to, I would probably still be single. But the real answer is there is a lot more to marriage than sexual attraction. And just because I don't desire sex doesn't mean I can't do it. What's really weird about the conservative church is they demand their followers marry without exploring sexual compatibility or fertility, and then after they are married, demand that they get sexually active and produce offspring. They have to enter into a lifelong commitment, not knowing if they are able to produce offspring, and then are looked down on if they are unable to do so. Although this attitude isn't surprising when the Bible indicates that offspring are a gift of God and are sometimes withheld from the undeserving. So if you don't have kids, it must be because God isn't happy with you. If only that really were the case, that only people who were capable of being good parents could actually produce offspring. If there were an omnipotent, all-loving God that wanted the best for all of his people, one would think that he would do this. But getting back to what Yuan said, sure, it's possible that asexual girls could get married and later develop their sexuality. But it sure isn't necessarily going to happen, and I'm living proof of that. Worse, it could be that they discover that they are gay, and now they're saddled into a heterosexual relationship they don't want. Yuan's advice to asexual teenage girls is vague. He doesn't specify that they should just wait for it or fake it until you make it, but that would be the message that I would have gotten from him. If this is what he means, it could have disastrous consequences as a couple enter into marriage, and the man then find out only after he is married that his now wife was only feigning being attracted to him because that's how it was supposed to be, and she was hoping that after they got married, she would later develop sexual feelings for him. A marriage couldn't start off much worse. It's built on a lie. Her lie that she found him attractive when she didn't. It's founded on hiding her identity from her mate until after marriage. I feel sorry for the guy duped into a marriage he didn't know he was getting into, and also for the girl, encouraged to fake feelings she doesn't have to enter into what might not be a good marriage. How long after being married is she to continue hiding her identity? Now let's address the identity issue. Yuan says,
God never says, be heterosexual for I'm heterosexual, but neither did he say, be homosexual for I'm homosexual. They're both secular Freudian categories. Instead, God says, be holy, for I am holy.
but the truth is, who you are is multifaceted. Yuan pointed out earlier that when asked, who are you, people give all sorts of different answers. They list occupation, religious affiliation, hobbies, family, as well as sexuality. How one answers the question, who are you, depends entirely on the context. When meeting your child's teacher, the appropriate response is, I'm Shelley's mother, not I'm gay. In fact, most of the time when someone asks, who are you, they're really asking for your name. And all of these are part of your identity. Our identity puts us into groups with others who are like us. Denying our identity or our affiliation with others like us deprives us of the companionship of like-minded people. So the presence or absence of sexual desires is absolutely a part of who you are. Is it all of you? Of course not. Nor do I know of anyone that claims that it is. Imagine going to an AA meeting and a man gets up to share and begins with, "Hi, I'm gay." Most people will think that he's at the wrong meeting. A few might think that that's his name. But regardless, it isn't the correct identification for the situation. Now, if the same guy gets up and says, "Hi, I'm Bob, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm also gay." We now have three pieces to Bob's identity. His name is Bob, he's an alcoholic, and he's gay. By adding this information about his identity, he creates a subgroup within the group. Now, any other gay alcoholics in the group are likely to feel a closer affinity with Bob, as they have two things in common. If there are enough of them, they might even decide to have their own meeting just for gay alcoholics. The point is, identity shares information about ourselves and allows us to find others like ourselves. Denying who or what we are keeps people isolated and from others who might want a relationship. All of what we feel and how we think is part of who we are. Not just the big things, but the small things too. Now, that doesn't mean we need to share everything, but denying your feelings as being part of your identity isn't healthy either. An interesting question for me is, had I known as a teenager that the reason I didn't feel the same way about boys that most of my friends did was because I was asexual, would I have lived my life any differently? I don't know. But had I heard someone like you on saying that this was a passing phase and him being a church leader, I would have trusted that he was right and just kept my feelings hidden until the sexual feelings finally developed. And when they didn't, I don't know. For one thing, I wouldn't know how long I was supposed to wait till 30, 40, 50, 60? Had I been in this position, I might have lost my faith sooner, as the promises of the church leaders like you on didn't come true. Because
Words matter. The words we use have meaning. And how we all answer this question, who am I, it affects our thoughts, our choices, our relationships.
So let's let you on expand on this a bit.
You see, our thoughts, our choices, our relationships are shaped in large part by how we all answer this question, who am I? Suggesting this close relationship between essence and ethics. What do I mean? Who we are, essence, impacts how we live, ethics. And vice versa is true. How we live impacts who we are, or will give us a wrong view of who we are. So, if you have a flawed personal ethic, you're going to have a flawed view of who you are.
I'm going to agree with you on here. If you've been told lies about who you are, such as, "Without God you are nothing," you developed a flawed ethic that says you need to obey the God that tells you that you are nothing without Him. Even if the God tells you to do something horrible, like sacrifice your child on an altar, or withdraw your emotional support for, your love for, and even your home from your child that is gay. And in turn, this flawed personal ethic that says that you are to blindly do what religious leaders tell you that the Bible says you should do, because of course your own reading of the Bible is not good enough, and leads to the flawed view of yourself that you are not good enough as a human being on your own. This is a flawed way to see yourself.
And if you have a flawed view of who you are, you're going to have a flawed personal ethic.
Yep. If you think you are the created being of a Christian God, then you will think that beating your children is okay. Drowning children for the sins of their parents is okay. Owning slaves is okay. Blood sacrifices are fine. Selling your children is fine. And don't forget that taking children as booty in wartime is also fine. Yep. A warped personal ethic.
Before I knew Christ, before my conversion, when I identified as a gay man, my whole world was gay. That affected my thoughts, my choices, my relationships. As a matter of fact, all my friends were gay men. I lived in an apartment complex in Midtown Atlanta that was 95% gay men. I worked out at a gay gym. I bought my groceries at what we nicknamed the gay Kroger.
I think that's just weird. Maybe that's just me. But my being asexual has never affected my friend group or where I shop or where I work out. Possibly because there are so few of us that there is no asexual Kroger. But my lack of sex drive, while being part of my identity, has very little influence on my life. About the only influence I can think of that it has had is when I tried masturbating and couldn't do it. It gave me a reason why. That's it. It simply was an explanation for why I don't feel the way most people feel. But what Yuan is describing as a bad thing for gay people, to associate primarily with other gay people, is exactly what Christian preachers tell good Christians they are to do. They are to come together, to worship together. They are to fellowship together, to break bread together. Some churches would go so far as to say that you should have no or very few non-believing friends. So which is it, Christopher? Should people not associate primarily with others who share their identifying traits? Or should they? Should believers associate only or primarily only with fellow believers? And if people in your preferred identity group should keep to themselves, why do you think it a bad thing for others in other groups to do the same?
This has to come before talking to someone and discussing with your friend or your relative who identifies as gay. It must come before discussing that this is sinful behavior. And you know why? How can we discuss with someone that this is sinful behavior when they don't even view it as behavior?
Now you are conflating the behavior with the feelings, something you teach in your book not to do. You make it clear in the book that being gay is not a behavior, it's a feeling. How do I know this? I've read it. This was the profound impact that the book had on me that I mentioned in the introduction. Prior to reading Yuan's book, I thought being gay was a choice. He made it clear in the book that he did not choose to be gay. This was a revelation to me at the time. How could I have known otherwise? I had no sexual feelings to compare them to. How could I know the origin of a feeling that was entirely foreign to me? Yuan goes on to say that acting on those feelings is a sin, just as acting on the feelings that you want to steal something is a sin. The only reason I was able to accept this when I first read it was because Yuan was a Bible professor at Moody Bible Institute. Moody Bible certainly wouldn't let a sinner teach the Bible to its students. My trust came entirely from the institution. And while this was a small first step, it was significant as it opened me up to hearing more. Specifically, it opened me up to reading the book Mama's Boy, Preacher's Son by Kevin Jennings, the founder of GLAAD. It was that book that opened me to the idea that a person can be gay and be a Christian. The conservatives, of course, would deny this. You can't pick and choose which parts of the Bible to follow. And yet, that is exactly what every Christian does. No one can follow everything the Bible says to do. Most excuse away all of the Old Testament laws with the claim that Jesus fulfilled them, so they don't have to fulfill them anymore. And despite that, many believers felt that they were still obliged to keep the Sabbath until our culture no longer thought that they needed to. Do Baptists still say that dancing is a sin? It was when I was in church. The point is that what is sin and bad behavior changes as the culture changes. Chewing gum in school wasn't acceptable when I was a kid, and now it is. Even you, Christopher, don't view being gay as behavior. Engaging in gay sex, yes, that is behavior. For the most part, everyone accepts that sex is behavior. Where we differ is you say that it is bad behavior, whereas I see it as neutral, amoral. If you want to do it, fine, go for it. And if you don't, that's fine too.
How can we talk to someone that this is sinful behavior when they don't even, the world and even now gay Christians don't even view it as behavior? What do they view it as? Who I am.
You've forgotten what you said in your book. Gay people don't view sex as who they are. The sex is the behavior. Being gay is part of who they are. But being gay is not a behavior. You had it right in your book. How did you forget?
See, if we were to go back 20 years before I came to Christ, and you were to tell me this is sin, I would not hear you say what I'm doing is sin or my desires are sinful. I wouldn't hear you say that. What I would mistakenly hear you say is that my whole person from head to toe is reprehensible to you and to God.
Isn't that exactly the Christian message? That all are sinners, and by their very nature of inherited original sin, all people are reprehensible to God? That was the message I got in church, and it's the message I am still getting from believers on social media. I'm just now wondering why, if humans are so bad, God keeps making them. Why not just stop and make something better?
Before I knew Christ, I couldn't hate my sin without hating myself. Now that God has given me the mind of Christ, I can hate my sin without hating myself.
Didn't they tell you that if you love your life, you will lose it, but if you hate your life, only then can you keep it for eternal life? And does Luke 14:26 not say, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, and brothers and sisters, and yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple? If you believe your Bible, you still tell people to hate themselves, regardless of their sexuality. Your Bible tells you that all humans are to hate themselves. So if your position is now that you only have to hate sin, you don't need to hate yourself, then according to your Bible, you cannot be a disciple of Jesus.
Christian leaders today are now normalizing the term gay, trans, queer. They're even advocating. Centers on this are even advocating churches, you need to find a queer Christian to be leading your church. You need to find a trans. That's where we are. I'm not talking about mainline denominations. I'm talking about people that respect them, even evangelical churches.
It depends on whether or not you want to survive the cultural changes that we are going through. Obviously, you don't. No skin off my nose. Go right ahead. Turn off your younger attendees by rejecting them and their friends for being who they are. Watch them all exit out the back door. Then you face an empty church. Your real problem is that your religion is being driven by what you can convince people of. The younger generation isn't buying that there's a God that cares about their sex life. And why should they? What kind of God is more concerned about who they love and who they sleep with than about what they are doing and how they can help their fellow man? Are they being loving and accepting people? These are what's important, and they know it. If you don't know it, that's on you.
They think that the term gay somehow only means same-sex attracted. That's naive and sometimes even verging on not being informed and ignorant. The term gay, yes, does mean that, but it means so much more. Let me show you how. What's the verb that the world puts before gay?
You got me there. I put happy before gay, but happy isn't a verb, so I was a bit confused there. When I was a kid, that's what gay meant, happy. I even knew a couple people named Gay, including a popular real estate agent in Killeen, Texas, who had married David Barr, and they were gay bar realtors.
Not doing gay, not feeling gay, that's more accurate. The world puts the verb being. Being gay, what does that mean? It's pointing to who I am. It wrongly points to who I am.
No, it really doesn't. If I say I'm cold or that I hate being cold, that doesn't mean that that is who I am. That's how I'm feeling or how I hate to feel. But what do I know? I'm old. I don't hear people say anything about being gay, just that they are gay or they are not gay, usually in answer to the question, are you gay?
So when we say being gay, that means who a person is and reveals this deep philosophical and theological misunderstanding. It's a faulty presupposition that points to the core of our being, our essence. See, being gay no longer means what I'm attracted to or what I desire or what I do. It is fully and wrongly become who a person is. In the subtle conversation around sexuality, this subtle shift from what to who, what I feel, what I do, to who I am, has created this radically distorted view of personhood.
Are you sure about that, Christopher? Look at my shirt. It says, I'm cold. I'm always cold. Cold is not who I am, it's how I feel, anytime the temperature outside is below 80 degrees. And it's not just cold. I'm scared, I'm bald, I'm fat. None of these are who I am. They all are ways that people describe themselves, but none of them are an identity. Saying I am gay, or for me, I am asexual, is what I am. It is how I identify sexually, but it isn't who I am. It is a part of who I am. So if you are unable to accept me as an asexual, then you are unaccepting of me as a person, despite this not being my entire identity. It would be like having a left foot club where right feet are not allowed. If you have 2 feet, you cannot enter. Your right foot is not who you are, but it is a part of you. If your right foot is not welcome in the club, then you are not welcome in the club. Not because you are your right foot, but because your right foot is a part of you. And if part of you is not welcome, then all of you is not welcome. The club welcomes your left foot, but not your right foot. Sorry, but if I can't bring my right foot, I'm not going. It's the same at your church. You might as well claim that you welcome all, but once they get there, they discover that gay people are not welcome, or at least not anyone who is in a gay relationship. The message is you can come, but only if you leave your gay identity at the door. Leave your sexuality, as that part of you is not welcome. Sorry. I come as a package deal. You either accept all of me or none of me. You don't get to pick and choose the parts you want.
And yet, let's think about this for a moment. There's no other feeling or desire or thought that we've made it who we are. Let's say if a person says, I am happy. Would we ever think that's who you are? Well, unless you're a dwarf and you hang out with 6 other dwarfs and Snow White. Besides that, that's not who you are. That's what you feel now. Fantastic. Great.
Cool. So you accept that. We have some common ground. Glad you see that the words I am do not necessarily express identity.
But let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Instead of saying I am happy, what if someone says I am depressed? And right now there's probably some of you that might wrestle with depression. Many of you have loved ones who struggle with depression, even Christians.
He has to throw that in because there are Christians who claim that Christians cannot struggle with depression. Because if you are in Jesus, you are happy all the time. And if you aren't happy in Jesus, you have a spiritual problem, not a mental health problem. I was told this as a believer, but other believers disagreed, especially since most people I knew had at least one Christian friend who struggled with depression. The real problem lies in a religion that claims that it will satisfy every longing and keep you singing as you go.
Jesus, sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go.
But then fails to do so.
If someone were to confide with you and share with you, I am depressed, should we ever say, that is who you are? No. And yet, I know people who identify as gay and they say, well, I didn't choose this.
Yeah, Christopher, you are one of them. Here's you in your book in chapter 2 saying that this is who you are.
I've been defending you, telling people it's not true, telling them that you've had several girlfriends. He lowered his voice and his face became serious. It's not true, is it? He was shocked when I told him it was. He'd meant well when he told others that I was straight. He really thought he was defending me from vicious rumors. But the rumors were true. While I wasn't effeminate or flamboyant, I was gay. As more people became aware of my real life, I felt more comfortable with my homosexuality. I no longer tried to hide it. If people weren't okay with it, I didn't care. For the first time, I felt I was being completely honest. Living any other way would be a lie. But most of the men I met in the Louisville bars seemed normal. They were professionals, bankers, lawyers, executives, dental students, men like me. I went from thinking there's something wrong with me to this is who I am. These people were my friends. This was where I belonged. When I was growing up, kids picked on me for being Chinese, playing the piano, loving the arts, and showing my feelings more than most boys did. I was horrible at sports, and I always felt like an outcast. But when I stepped into the gay community, I was introduced to a world of outcasts who had come together and become family. They stood up for one another and supported one another. They laughed with me, cried with me, and accepted me for who I was, gay.
In the book, you also say that you didn't choose this.
Do people choose depression? So it's who you are.
Not the same. Depression is an illness. People don't identify with their illnesses. Being gay is not an illness. Being straight, part of a person's identity? Damn straight it is.
I know people who were even raised in the church now and just thrown their faith away or tried to distort it and say, I am gay. And they say, well, I prayed for God to take it away and he didn't. So God made me this way.
Well, if that's the way you are, and if God made you, then yes, God made you that way. To say that God didn't make you that way means you either need to deny that you are that way or that God made you. Which one are you denying? You are gay, You don't deny that. Are you saying that God didn't make you? Or did God make you straight and you changed yourself to make yourself gay? If so, you need to rewrite your book, as that isn't what you say in your book.
I know people who've struggled with depression. They prayed and prayed for God to take it away. Now, can he? Absolutely. Does he always? No.
This was a major issue for me. I had a serious problem with depression and prayed constantly for God to take it away, and no, God did. Even through that, my faith did not falter. Did I think God made me that way? No, but I sure as hell didn't make myself that way. So if I was in fact made by a God, God must have made me that way. There really are no other options. You really have a horrific God that wants people to suffer from all kinds of problems and makes them with these problems or makes them susceptible to these problems. And then he tells them to beg him to fix their problems. And then he sits up there and says, "Nah, sorry, can't be bothered. What are you complaining about? I didn't give you any more than you could handle." Except none of that is true. If there were a God that makes people with problems, he most certainly does give them more than they can handle, as many die trying to handle them. I myself came close to dying trying. So not only do people with depression say that God made them that way, pastors say that too. Hell, Mother Teresa said that God gives people suffering because suffering is a beautiful thing.
How about maybe an action? A sin. You know, someone who gossips all the time. You're a gossiper. Is that who this person is? No. What you do, so stop it. Or an adulteress. Is that who she is? No. What she does. And yet the term gay is no longer about what we do or what we feel. It has wrongly become who we are.
One can stop committing adultery by ceasing that activity. Being gay is not an activity. One cannot simply decide not to be gay and therefore not be gay. You know this. You wrote about it in your book. Remember your book? You have a much deeper problem here, though, a theological problem. If your sin is not who you are, then you are not a sinner? I've heard that time and again, that sinner is not what you do, but who you are. You don't need salvation because you made a bad choice or some bad choices, because a sinner is what you are, not what you do. If a sinner is not what you are, but what you do, then a person can simply choose not to sin and doesn't need Jesus. The whole point of the Christian message is supposed to be that you can't fix this on your own, because your sin is more than what you do. It has corrupted your very being. A sinner is who you are. That is supposed to be why you need a Savior, because only a God can remake you from what you are, a sinner, into what you are not, redeemed. So, Christopher, unless you are preaching an entirely new gospel, a person's sin is indeed who they are. They don't sin because they choose to. They sin because they are sinners. And if you disagree, that's fine. But then no one needs Jesus. They just need to make better choices because no one is a sinner. They are just people choosing to sin. And I can't believe I have to explain Christian theology to a Bible professor from Moody Bible Institute. This is what happens when you shift your message to try to fit the culture shift, as Yuan is doing here. His message used to be in alignment with mainstream Christian theology, but as he is trying to tailor his message to fit trendy issues, he is losing sight of the theology that his message is supposed to be based on. This is why apologetics doesn't work. The Bible wasn't written to cover every issue that we face today, and yet that is what the apologist needs it to do. So they reinterpret the message to fit what they want it to fit. And what unfortunately ends up happening is like a bed where the sheets are too short. Christopher has pulled the sheet up, but left his left foot exposed to the cold. Live your life. This week, fresh hot Granny chocolate chip cookies for our recent super chat go to Jean Marie 8196 and Susan Stein Kraus 2821. Thank you for your support. And also a cookie for everyone, just in case I missed anyone. Sometimes the comments get buried and I don't find them. So if you sent a super chat and didn't get a cookie, here's a cookie for you. Thank you all, and live your life.